All right, the recording has started, and this is the February 4th, 2020 Crossplane Community Meeting. As usual, we will go ahead and start with a bit of a milestone checkup. We are almost right in the middle of the 0.8 milestone. The last release of 0.7 was mid-January timeframe, and we are targeting mid-February for the 0.8 release, where we just started a sprint, internally a 2-week sprint yesterday morning on Monday. So that will be done on Friday of next week. And so that may work well timing wise for a code freeze at the end of the sprint, and then trying to do a release, run the release early the week of Monday, February 17th. If things look stable from our initial testing, then we could just go ahead and run the release on Monday, February 17th. So we've got this week and next week to finish up our planned work items for 0.8. And let's go ahead and take a look at the roadmap, which I believe Phil updated quite recently. Thank you, Phil. Yep. So let's see. So template stacks, we'll talk more in details through some of those in some of the PRs that are mentioned later on in the document. And then we also have some of the easy stacks, the minimal stacks, if you will. Those are coming together nicely with the GCP stack and Azure and AWS all functional. They are, they make it very easy to install some of the basic functionality like networking and resource classes, et cetera, with just a single CRD for the Azure, AWS, and GCP environments. And they are running, they're functional from all the work that Muafik did recently, but they are running as Golang controllers, and they are not ported over to being a template stack functionality yet. That will happen after the template stack base functionality that Muafik and Suskin and Marcus are all working on now. So that will probably come in next week or next sprint. Host-aware Stack Manager was merged into master yesterday. Bless Hassan's heart for being as patient as he was to get that into master. That was a great example of a review system where it dragged on for too long through the holidays and then kind of lost momentum from getting the eyes on it that it needed. So I take responsibility for that one, for not getting to look at it until recently, but then we got the momentum up on it, and Hassan persevered through multiple merge conflicts and did an excellent job at getting that host-aware Stack Manager up to quality and merged into master and ready to be included in the 0.8 release. So great job, Hassan, on that. Then we're working on multiple designs as well. Excuse me. I think we've talked about some of these before, but in general, being able to, without code, define your own claim kinds, without having to define any types or anything in Go. Nick has been working hard on that and being able to, for a particular claim to be satisfied by multiple resources, such as like a database and a firewall rule or whatever the composition of claims may be. Nick's been working on that. And then finally, we're also going to bump up a few more types to beta in this release. So storage in buckets and networking resources. Dan, are you working on that, or is Muafik working on that?
I've got a PR open for the networking resources. Muafik was working on the storage buckets. I think they've kind of tailed off a little bit while he's been helping out with the template stack stuff. But yeah, I would not anticipate the storage buckets getting in for 0.8.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I think it's waiting on 1106 too for the storage buckets. I thought he mentioned.
What 1106? Oh yes, okay. Because the storage buckets have multiple, like the Azure ones have like a blob and a container or whatever like the component classes are for the composition.
Yeah, I think even for the GCP one, he was saying that he needed that. So it's becoming more of a blocking issue, which is why Nick's having that as a high priority.
Okay. Cool. All right. Nick will continue to persevere on that as well then. And the last one on the list here is something I am very thrilled with personally, is that Nick spent some time doing our logging and eventing the right way. I think we've had a long-standing problem where if something goes wrong with the system, there's not much information logged about it or surfaced easily for users to figure out what went wrong. And so Nick did it the Kubernetes way and added events for all the different phases of reconciliation for managed resources and binding and all that sort of stuff. So it should be in the 0.8 release a much better troubleshooting and observability story, and without compromising architecture purity as well. So thank you, Nick, for doing that the Kubernetes way. All right, so that's the roadmap for 0.8. And we talked about the timing, the planned timing for when we want to do a mid-month release again, sticking to our schedule here of a release every month in the middle of the month. So we can move ahead on to the community topics section. So the KubeCon Amsterdam schedule and CFP proposals notices went out last week-ish or so. And so there are a number of talks from the Crossplane community that got accepted. Phil, you got one accepted for speaking with Microsoft, right, about OAM, the open application model in Crossplane.
Yep, super excited about that. Right
on. And I also got a talk accepted for speaking about the open application model with Alibaba. And so there's a little bit different focuses between those two. We'll make sure that there's high quality content in both of them and not much overlap there. But so we're both very excited about those talks. Steve, you got a talk accepted too, right?
Indeed, I did.
Which one did you get, buddy?
Hit the easy button on easier application deployment.
Right on. That'll be exciting. Okay. And then Dan, you also got a maintainer track talk accepted?
Yep. I'll be speaking with one of the other team members on the release engineering team for Kubernetes on our release process and some of the tools we use to publish new releases.
Awesome, man. And yeah, if there's easily applicable knowledge from that release process to bring back into the Crossplane community and our release process there, that would be awesome. But I know that from my understanding of Prow and all the systems there, that it's not really a streamlined minimal lift, so to speak.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we're talking on it, because we're working on refactoring a whole lot of Bash into an actual tool. So
refactoring Bash sounds fun. Hope you make it to Amsterdam alive after all that. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of talks got accepted there. I don't know if anyone else on the call got one accepted, but that's super exciting that there'll be a number of chances to get on stage and talk about what we're doing and meet more community members. And so that's awesome. Great work on.
And Hassan got his hosted Crossplane talk accepted as well for Kubernetes and Kubernetes.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Hassan did get that talk accepted. That's awesome. Great job, Hassan. All right. So the Binding Status episodes, Dan's amazing live streaming show, had some really cool episodes recently, and there's some cool episodes coming up as well. Dan, do you want to talk about some of the recent TPS stuff?
Yeah, sure. The most recent episode was kind of a demo of a number of different things. Number one, we added some upstream functionality to Ketchup, which is Alex Ellis's tool to install K3S pretty much anywhere.
That's how you pronounce that?
That's what the README says. But I usually just call it keys up or K3S up, but just trying to, adhere to the community standards there. So you can now install Crossplane with that tool as well. So if you bootstrap a K3S cluster, you can just install Crossplane right in there with one command with that CLI. So we showed that. We also showed doing some kind of like lightweight federation by scheduling from a K3S cluster running on a Google VM to Raspberry Pi in my apartment that was also running a K3S cluster. So that was pretty cool. You can check that out. And there's also a guide for reproducing that on your own. And then this is actually the first time we brought it up, and we'll have some announcements this week about it. But next week on Thursday, back to our regular time at 9 a.m. Pacific, we'll be doing a show with Crossplane and Octeto, which is basically an open source project that allows you to do local development and kind of have like a hot reload experience with your apps in Kubernetes. So that's pretty cool. And then adding some managed services to that with Crossplane should be fun. And actually the CEO of Octeto, the company behind the open source project, is going to co-host that. So should be pretty fun.
Right on, man. That's super exciting. I love these like collaboration episodes that you're getting lined up to like, use Crossplane and integrate with other open source projects and, get some of that, I hate using the word, but I'm going to use it, synergy. So that's great work, man. That's super exciting. Is that Octeto, that sounds like sort of like a project that I believe came out of Google that was for doing like local development in Kubernetes clusters, or like abstracting away where your Kubernetes cluster is, so you can, as you're coding and like hit save or deploy or whatever, it, reloads or does the deployment of your latest binaries and images to your cluster. It was like scaffold or skeleton or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? That project?
Yeah, I think it's Scaffold. I haven't actually used it, and I haven't used Octeto either. So it'll be a lot of learning, but it seems pretty cool. And they also have a platform where you can basically get a namespace to do local development and connect to it from your local machine and that sort of thing. So you can imagine some pretty cool use cases where, let's say you're developing like a web app and you need MySQL database just for testing or something like that. You can just add that alongside your manifest to be syncing your application with that and then connect to the database.
Cool, right on, man. Oh, that's exciting that you'll get to dive into that. And I am highly confident that the quality of your investigation and what you come up with will be exciting. So I will be tuned in next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific to watch some Crossplane and Octeto action. Sweet. All right, so I had just dropped a link in here. There's a proposal out to OAM, the Open Application Model. That is a standardized way to define applications within the Kubernetes ecosystem that is being worked on by a number of companies. Nick Cope is driving a proposal to alter the spec for Open Application Model to make it a little bit more Kubernetes friendly. Have some more assumptions you can make about presence of a Kubernetes API server in the Kubernetes API, and then how Crossplane can in as a runtime and integrate in with the open application model. So Nick's been doing a great job driving that and talking to a lot of the folks at Microsoft and Alibaba. And there's a link to that discussion in the agenda here. So you can take a look at that as you wish, and also weigh in some comments there as well. Dan, this is your item about AWS service accounts.
Yep, so we had a recent community issue opened requesting the ability to instead of basically providing your credentials in a secret, which we currently do for all our providers for our different infrastructure stacks, basically being able to fall back on a service account that connects to an IAM role in AWS. So if you're running on EKS, basically it will configure your nodes in your cluster to have connection information via IAM role. So you can authenticate to the API that way. Which would allow you to have kind of like more fine-grained control and also rotate credentials and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of people that use EKS use this kind of authentication basically exclusively. So we definitely want to enable that from an organizational perspective. So I'm working on that, and it should be in for 0.8. I'm hoping it does require a little bit of testing in terms of setting up clusters and making sure it works for different use cases. But it should be pretty cool functionality, but we'll need some documentation around it because it obviously affects the way that you actually deploy Crossplane itself, because the pods have to be able to access environment variables on the nodes, basically, so you have to give them root access. But we'll probably just result using documentation to explain how to do that for now, rather than adding some sort of flag in the deployment just for the time being.
Yeah, that's fair. And I also really like how this is a request from from the community for a user request for this functionality. So I definitely like that we're incorporating that feedback and listening to new scenarios that would, expand the usefulness and value of Crossplane and responding to it by doing the integration and the work. So that's awesome, man. Okay. So yeah, that is the community topics section. So we can go ahead and move on to different pull requests here that might need some attention. I just put a link to the pull requests, like period, so we don't need to go look at that. But I knew that the work that's ongoing in template stacks right now is across 3 different developers, Marcus, Suskin, and Wafik. And so there's a lot of velocity going on there right now. So I wanted to just bring up some of the pull requests that may be ready to start getting some eyes on them. So Marcus, you added both of these here?
Yeah, I
12,
added
14,
both.
12, 17? Okay.
When I added 12, 17, I had to add the work close to. 12, 14 is Dan Suskin's PR that introduces the stack definition type and a stack definition controller. So with this template stacks work, in a previous sort of preview functionality that was added to Crossplane, there was the introduction of a stack configuration type, which introduced the behaviors that allow you to say for a given CRD, execute this this Helm chart or this customize URL. And so in this current PR and this current round of PRs, we're extending that to Helm and customize. And the way that the stack controllers work, we're finding that we're going to have a better time moving away from this stack configuration, this thin stack configuration type, to something that's more like the full stack type. And so we've got this intermediary stack definition type that we're using. There's a lot more things that we expect will need to change in the stack type later on. And there's even maybe the possibility that stack and stack installs could merge. And so we don't want to introduce too many changes to stack right now. So that's where this new stack definition type comes from. The stack definition controller will produce the stack resource. And yeah, so this PR sets up the new type, the new controller. My PR this is one of the ones that we've been using for end-to-end testing, along with the one that Hassan has, which is in the resource pack, Crossplane IO resource pack repository. And his PR, like my PR, they require this Suskin one to go through first. And there's probably a few refactor levels that are going to have to happen, or rebase levels that are going to have to happen before this happens. So the host aware stack manager code will, I think, at least affect my PR. I'm not sure if it affects Suskin's. The logging, the improved logging that Nick was working on, updates stacks. And so if that gets in first, that'll probably affect something. I don't know if it'll affect Suskin's, but I'm sure it'll affect mine. So I think I'm 3 rebases behind where my PR is going to be fully reviewable. But where I'm standing on it's basically working. So
you see rebases in your future.
I see a lot, yeah.
Nice, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Cool, yes, I took a pass through this first pull request to define the type and controller over the weekend. And so I think Suskin replied to my comments yesterday, so I could take another pass to hopefully converge on merging this today to unblock some of the other work. No problem with that. And then yeah, ping me and let me know like when this is ready, like conflicts resolved, merge, things rebased and whatever, and then I'll be happy to take a look at this too, Marcus.
Cool. Yeah, as it stands, you can see it's based on there's 10 commits from the other PR just sitting in here, and yeah.
Yep, sounds good. And Stephen, you brought up 1226 here, sir. Is there anything you want to mention about it, or just kind of raising a hand for to the PR that needs attention?
Yeah, there was one concern brought up about our standard for removing old designs versus marking them as defunct. I think Marcus brought up. And I just wanted to address that, but also just raise a hand for this PR. So I didn't know if what the proper process was for removing old designs if they haven't really been implemented anywhere fully.
Like removing like an entire design document, or like editing a design, or
removing an entire design document and then some small implementations of like starting what that design was implementing.
Got it. Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly the details, but in general, for me, the most important part is like what is the contract, what like types or the API that we surface. Like if there is some API that we surface that's already beta or something like that, then removing a design or removing functionality from it is much more of a conversation than if it's not something that's an API or a contract that people have started to use, or it's it's still alpha level or whatever that may be. Then the designs can be churned or iterated, as a more positive connotation, iterated over, fairly freely going through the pull request process. So I'm not too concerned just at the outset of listening to the way you described it.
Okay.
Cool. And then it looks like Michael added some comments here that only solely looking at the length of it might be important.
Yeah, so I
content.
force pushed an update that we had discussed outside of this PR. So he was just adding a comment to add some context to why those changes happened.
Oh, okay. So this is not a request or feedback about something that still needs to be changed or updated?
Yeah, it was just more information around the latest force push that happened, I think, right before his comment.
Okay, cool. And then you've got these other related PRs for the stack repos themselves that kind of implement these changes discussed in this PR, right?
Yes, so those are a result of the one design file that I'm removing in this PR.
Got it. Alrighty, sweet. Yeah, that's on my list as well, Stephen, to take a look at today. So that should be no problem.
Okay.
One thing to mention on some of these PRs about changing the UI metadata, and I've mentioned this to Stephen before, but I'd like to get to a place where we can do at least some generation, especially in regards to or even if not generation, some of this is like updating the version number of the stack in the UI metadata, which isn't part of our release process. Like when we do our prep on the release branch, we haven't been touching the UI metadata. So long term, I'd like to do some sort of generation around this UI metadata, and short term, we should probably add a step in the prep process of the manifest and that sort of thing on the release branch for each of them that updates the UI metadata as well.
Like the version of the UI metadata, Dan?
Yeah, so each of the different resources here has a version at the top that just matches the stack definition. So if you look at like stack GCP or any of them, Stephen's gone in and bumped all the UI metadatas from 0.4 to 0.5, which we obviously should be on anyway. This might also be a candidate for backport. I don't know how relevant that is with these being consumed or not. But just something to keep in mind.
And maybe I'm wrong, but that version, the version of the UI schema, I think is coincidental right now to be the same version as the stack itself. I thought this is an independent versioning. That's its own
It
version.
is, yeah. So this version should only be updated when the UI schema itself is updated.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's not explicitly part of the release process, but only as Steven's mentioning, when the schema itself changes. So yeah, I believe it's an independent version that can, and then there's probably better ways to have a process around that, Dan. I totally understand that part of it, but I think it is important to note that it's not right now part of the release versioning and process of the stack itself.
Gotcha. That's really helpful, Stephen. One thing I wanted to ask, so if like one of the APIs changes, let's say the DB subnet group goes to V1 beta 1 or something like that, and some of the fields change. If we needed to change the UI schema as well, would we just bump to 0.6 on that? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, if some content within the UI schema gets updated, then that version number should change.
Gotcha. So if that's tied, well, I guess that it could update outside of an actual update to the
right.
API. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, but that does also raise the good point of maintenance of these files. Like if, if the CRD, the type itself changes to add new fields, then, there is no process or enforcement right now that the UI schema also gets updated. So some automation or generation or something like that would be very nice so that you're not, updating a type to add a new field and then it doesn't show up in some UI somewhere because somebody forgot to update the UI schema. So that's a good point, Dan.
For sure.
You're so smart, Dan. All right. Where am I in this document here? So that's the resource status design, and then some naming in Stack Minimal GCP. Is this a new PR? I don't remember this one. Oh,
yeah,
1
this
hour
just
ago.
got up this morning.
East Coast.
This is just kind of related to a change that Muvafiq recently did to update from Crossplane IO to Crossplane. It was causing a break. And so I just am updating some other names to align with how Stack GCP does the naming. I think the issue right now is the Crossplane CLI tool. When you run Crossplane and it automatically adds Crossplane IO prefixed to a lot of these places. And it looks like after the fact, manually, those have to be updated. These particular files don't really have much effect, but just to maintain consistency between the different stacks, I just wanted to update these.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Stephen. And I would say that these ones here probably do, these ones are functional changes here because it's talking about like the image repo and image name. So these ones are probably, I think they're only local stuff or the sample. Yeah. But yeah, those ones have functionality changes. These ones look to be more, vanity or consistency wise. So, but thank you for finding that, Stephen. And if there is a bug well, first of all, the Stack Minimal GCP definitely is a good reminder about like automation and testing and verification of these stacks that we're building. Cause like I made a change to like update one name of the stack in one place and that wasn't all of them. And Muvafiq found another one and then you found like a third one. So it's like clearly there's not the right verification end to end to make sure that everything is fully updated or verified. So that's one thing. But then like if there is a bug or some antiquated functionality in the Crossplane CLI tools themselves, then that would be good to open an issue for it and so we could track that and update that.
Sure, absolutely.
And go ahead, Steven.
And just to note, I'm going to be opening up PRs for the other minimal stacks as well soon to just kind of echo these changes.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. Then yeah, to have those consistent across all the stacks. That sounds great. Cool, man. You're going to have more commits in the Crossplane repos than I do soon, Stephen. Keep up the good work. Good job. And then I am going on a note, somewhat slightly related note. There are some folks who wanted to get started with a little bit of a simple stack development. And so I was actually maybe not this morning, but sometime today, going to go through the stack, the Crossplane CLI. There's a quick start there for how to, simply, here we go, quick start stacks, to use the tools, the Crossplane CLI tools to initialize a project and get it building and publishing and validated and all that stuff. So I was going to point somebody at this, but I didn't know if this is up to date. So I was going to take a run through it myself to see if it's still functional and, up to date. If it's not, then update it before I send that link off. Has anybody on this call happened to go through this quick start recently themselves to see if it's somewhat up to date?
So I talked to Muvafiq this morning about this, and I was asking if he had used it to bootstrap his different minimal stacks and that sort of thing. He said yes, but he said there's some issues with after you actually do the initial setup. I don't think all parts of the Crossplane CLI are working correctly, and there's a number of open issues on there, and some of them are pretty friendly to new contributors as well. I think a couple of them have good first issue on them, but we could probably do some more refining around some of those issues, as well as making some updates. I'd like to be able to port some of the bash in there over to Go so that it's testable and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Cool. If I find issues when I run through it, I will I'll update these issues or maybe even provide fixes as well. But the one thing that I think has been tricky about migrating the implementation of Crossplane CLI from scripts, bash scripts to a Go binary is the distribution of it. To be able to ship and publish the binary as opposed to right now, it's, just a couple of, like couple of kilobyte size, bash scripts that are really easy to download and install locally by just copying the scripts over. So when you have a binary in place, like if the distribution story becomes more challenging, they'll have to be thought through.
Yeah, so I mean, some of it's already in a binary, like the trace command and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and I noticed that too, actually, when from this note, when I was walking through installing it the latest last night. Mm-hmm. It's like the trace command will not be installed. Like, oh, shoot. So we already have an issue with that.
Right. Yeah, you have to there are some releases with the binaries, but you'd have to manually install those.
Yeah, so distribution story gets a little bit more difficult, but I think the implementation story gets a lot more solid than having bash scripts to maintain. So, and the testability and all that sort of stuff. So, yep, I would like them to be Go binaries as well.
Crew is a plugin system for kubectl, and I have a PR in here that makes Crossplane CLI a little closer to Crew friendly. And then there's like a gist of what the PR on the Crew side would look like. I think I have the gist linked in there somewhere. Yeah. And so anyway, with that, the distribution would be maybe easier because we could recommend folks just use Crew.
Yeah, then that gets the release from GitHub, like from the releases page or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think, yeah, that is like the standard upstream story, right? Is Crew as package management.
Yeah, it's like I think it's on the official Kubernetes projects.
Interesting. Yeah, good way to start that effort, Marcus. I appreciate that. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, Kubernetes SIG/Crew. It sounds pretty official.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So that was the last, we went on a little bit of a tangent there. Sorry, everybody. That was the last item on the agenda here. So I will open the floor for anybody who might have additional agenda items that did not make it to the agenda doc. And if there are none, then we can go ahead and adjourn for the week. All right. Then we will go ahead and adjourn. And thanks everybody for joining this week.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
Great. See ya.
Bye.